We're live. Hi everyone. It's took us some time, but I've got David Jewell here for tonight's author chat, and he's going to start off by introducing himself and telling us a little bit about his books.
Hello there, I'm David Jewell. I'm an author, screenwriter, writer. I did 31 years in the police force, so I've got quite a background in police work. So at least the books that I write are authentic, with none of the awful cliches that you sometimes get in some people that don't know anything about police work. After leaving the job, I got involved in making a documentary series about writers, actually, involving 6 writers with connections to the Northeast. The documentary series was originally shown on a local TV channel called Made in Tyne and Wear, but then it was networked throughout the whole country, so you may have actually caught up with it since you have an interest in writing. 6-part TV series, as I say, featuring such writers as Mari Hanna, the crime writer, Stephen Laws, the horror writer, Gavin Williams, the screenwriter, Phil Penfold, the journalist. Went down very well, and as I say, it was networked throughout the country. So I hope you managed to catch some of that. My most recent thing, just before the lockdown, was I did a documentary biography on the controversial Northeast politician Ronnie Campbell, who was a Labour politician. And the documentary featured everybody from Jeremy Corbyn to Dennis Skinner to other people on the other side of the House, such as Sir Nicholas Soames and the Speaker of the House as well. So I thought that television was where I was going to develop into, but unfortunately COVID has put an end to all the documentary filmmaking, and it came just at the time that my first book, which is The Death Rattle, was released, and that's gone down very, very well, particularly amongst police officers. So the second one is almost written. I had written it, but like everything, writers, I know I'm speaking to readers and writers, they go over stuff and they think, oh, I could change that, I could make that bit better, I could alter that. So I'm doing a rewrite now of book 2, which has the working title of The Jackie in the Box Murders, but it might change before it's released. That'll be post-lockdown.
Who designs your covers and comes up with the book titles?
Well, I designed the book cover for The Death Rattle, and in the background you can see the actual castle, the castle keep that is the new castle about which the city was named. The book, that's a notorious area below the castle is a notorious area in Newcastle where people cruise around at night, and the opening of the book is set at that location, and it's a murder, and a body is found in this area. But when the police discover the identity of the victim, it sends the story in a whole new direction.
Have you ever been tempted to help other authors as a police consultant?
I have in the past. I've never been paid to be a police consultant, but I'm sure everybody here has seen the wonderful television series Inspector Morse. Now, Inspector Morse was written obviously as a series of crime books, but they were transferred onto the screen. And my very good friend Michael Wilcox, who lives in the Northeast, lives out near Haltwhistle. When I was a detective, he contacted me and he said, "Oh, David, I have to write a scene in Inspector Morse where somebody is shown pictures for an ID parade. So how would I do it?" So I got all the research together and I contacted him and I said, "Right, this is what you've got to do, Michael. It's got to be a certain number of pictures, 12 pictures. They have to be this size. They're in an album," and explained it. all the way down the line. And he said, all right, great, great, great. Then, when it appeared on screen, it was nothing like I'd said to him. So I was straight on the phone. I said, Michael, I told you how to write that scene, and what happened? And he said, well, I wrote it as you said, but the director decided it didn't look good on screen. So he changed it all. So that's the only time I've been a police advisor, I would think.
What would you say is the most accurate for police procedures and then on TV?
Well, do you mean of the police procedural television programs?
Yeah, just like think, yeah. What kind of crime show have you seen that sort of got the policing thing right? We've asked other sort of people who've worked in the police and things this question. It's really interesting.
I've got to confess, right? I'm biased. I'm very biased because one of my naughty little secrets is that, as well as being a writer and director and producer, I do extra work on Vera. So I'm a support artist on Vera, and I find that they do strive to get things very accurate. There was one scene where we were at a disused farm, and I played a police constable, and I was inside the cordon, and I hadn't been provided with certain forensic booties which you put on over your shoes. And I said to the director, you know, are my feet going to be in shot? And he said, well, yes. And I said, well, in that case, I should be wearing these blue forensic booties. And straight away he said, right, okay, we need to be accurate. And next thing I know, there I was, all kitted out in the proper forensic gear. So Vera strives to get it right. That's the only experience really of television I've had. And as I say, they really do work hard to try and get it accurate. And Brenda, bless her, one time we were up at a place way out in the sticks in Chopwell, I think it was. And there was a body lying unconscious on a floor in a house. And Brenda Blethyn said to me, well, how would I get into this house? And I said, well, you know, you can see through the window, there's an injured body on the floor. You don't need a warrant or anything, you just go in. And she said, well, yes, but how? And I said, well, just kick the door in. And she suddenly ran up towards the door, and I thought she was going to kick at the door. And she stopped just before she got the door, burst out laughing and said, I'm only kidding you. And but when we came to film it, that's what she got Kenny to do. Kenny Doughty, the actor that plays Aidan, he kicked the door in. So, yeah, if I've got to say anything, I'm very biased, but I love Vera.
You're the first person that we've asked that question to who said that answer.
Well, I hope so, because nobody else has been in Vera.
No, but after the sort of people who are experts on police procedures and they've never named Vera.
No. Well, as I say, they do strive to get it right.
They normally talk about Happy Valley. Have you seen that one?
Yes, I've seen that. I quite enjoyed Happy Valley. I thought it was very dramatic and very good. It's a while since I watched it, so I hope you're not going to ask me anything specific on it. But
no, that's just normally the one named as being quite accurate.
Yeah, well, I quite liked it. I'd certainly pick it up if it wasn't accurate, because as both a writer and as a former cop, I was inspector in an area called Blythe, which had the reputation of being the violent drugs capital of Northumberland. But actually, I quite liked working there. There are certain things that happen that I really do hate. I don't like to see inaccuracies on television programs in police procedure. But one of the worst things, and I hate it, you guys must have seen it, it's such a cliche, is when the policeman faints at the sight of a dead body or faints at the murder scene. What a load of rubbish. I've never seen that in 30 odd years, and I don't know anyone else that has done. You know, when you're at the scene of a murder, no matter how grisly it is, and I've been to a few, no matter how grisly the scene is, you have a job to do, like anybody else has a job to do, and you get on with that job and you deal with that job, and you don't think at the time. You're in work mode. You get on with it. Maybe afterwards you might sit at home and think about what you've just dealt with. But at the time, you get on with it. And I hate to see this cliche of somebody either being sick or fainting at the scene of murder. What a load of rubbish.
I'm going to ask you some of the questions that are on the stream.
Yeah, sure.
Samantha says hello, and she said, how long did book 1 take to complete, and has book 2 been easier?
Hello, Samantha. Yeah, book 1 took quite a long time to complete because it was all new to me. I knew which authors I loved. I love Ian Rankin, who I've met several times at Harrogate. I love Mari Hanna, who's a very good friend of mine. I love her books. I love Peter James, who I haven't met, although I've met his advisor since then. So you kind of draw on this. And yes, the first book, it was all new and it was hard. The second book, I'd had as an idea for some time. And when I just sat down, it just seemed to flow off the paper. Having said that, now I've reread it, there are things I want to change. So I'm going to re-edit that book. There is a third one, which is also written, which once again just flew off onto paper. And that's an international crime thriller, which came, funny enough, I was down at Harrogate, and this idea just came to me about a possible thriller, different from the Jack Slade books, which is the first 2 books. And I jotted down some notes, and as soon as I got home, I started writing it. And that one flew very quickly as well. So we'll see. But yeah, the first one was a bit of a problem, but after that, it's been okay. I've got some plans at the moment for things that were supposed to go ahead before lockdown, and they were documentaries as a sort of follow-up to the long film documentary of From Pit to Parliament, which you can check out on IMDb. But yeah, as soon as I get an idea, I've just got to sit down and write it down.
So Lucy, one of our admins, has just said that Peter James is a lovely man. She's met him a couple of times. We had him on to do an author chat with us, and he writes, his writing room got views all around Jersey. It's like in a little tower.
Yeah.
Where do you write?
Well, where do I write? I write in my little untidy office at the top of my house. When I want to escape, and I had a screenplay that I was writing, it was a ghost story, and I just couldn't seem to finish it. I couldn't seem to get it right. And my brother and I, some years ago, bought a rather run-down sort of cottage in Northumberland. It's a 2-story cottage, quite run down. And we went in and we renovated it, and we were going to use it as a family holiday home, but it's ended up getting rented as a holiday home. But when it's not being used, as I say, I had this ghost story to finish, and I went up with another friend of mine who was a writer, and we went up and we sat at opposite ends of the house, and we wrote during the day till lunchtime. We had some lunch, and then we went back off to opposite ends of the house, carried on writing, and then in the evening we'd go out for a meal and a couple of beers, and by the end of the week we'd both written our full screenplays that we wanted to write. So that's my escape. My bolt hole is in beautiful Northumberland, an area I love, which is also the area where Vera is filmed.
So I've got some other comments, but when you first published, you sort of were on the news and got a few things in news articles about a case of mistaken identity. Do you want to tell us about that?
No. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I will. All right. What it was, just before the book was about to be released, the book critic, and author John Cowton rang me up, and he said, "David, did you know that there's another author called David Jewell who lives in America?" And I said, "No, I wasn't aware of that." And he said, "He writes bondage books." And I said, "Bondage books?" He says, "Yes, they're sort of like soft porn, I think." He hadn't read any. He assured me he'd never read any. But he said, "I think they're a bit naughty." And I said, "Oh, God, right." So I contacted Rod, my publisher, and I said, "Rod, there's a guy in America. Do you think I need to change my name to David G. Jewell or something like that?" And he said, "Well, I've sent stuff off to the printers. Oh, don't bother," he said. It's not going to matter. He writes bondage books in America. You write crime books in the UK. Nobody's going to match the two of you, are they?" Famous last words. Yes, there was an article in The Guardian. The Times picked it up. The local papers picked it up. I think it was the Times that had if I can remember what the headline was, but they had some great fun with the fact that I was the same name as a bondage writer in America. So, but I've got over it. I tried contacting him and he's never replied. He probably doesn't want to be being a bona fide bondage writer. He probably doesn't want anything to do with a policeman.
Sam says there's no such thing as bad publicity.
No, yep, she's probably right, because I think the book sales did go up, and it was good publicity. And I did an interview with the BBC about the book, and they'd obviously seen as well because they picked me up on it. So yeah, it's been the source of some good fun, and it got a few good laughs amongst people. So why not? I can live with that.
TG, who's one of our she's amazing. She's one of our admins, and she writes this TK.
I know TG.
She writes this TK Gearing, and she has the same publisher as you.
Yes, she does. Yes.
Yeah. I think Rod's in the group as well.
She's probably watching.
Might
I'll have to be careful what I say.
Yeah. T says, with your TV contacts, has no one picked up Death Rattle for a TV series?
I dream of it. I do dream of it. I mean, the bottom line is, if nobody ever picks it up, I might be tempted to produce it myself. But I'm really hoping somebody picks it up. There was a very interesting. This is going to sound awful because the name slipped out of my head now. I think it's Alzheimer's kicking in. I got in contact with a lady at some point. Something came to my house addressed to a lady at my home address, and I thought, what the hell is this? And it was a letter I'd sent to Sprout Pictures, just with a copy of the book, because you try and put it out, I think. And she, I saw that her name was on a letter addressed to me, and I thought, what on earth can this be? And the size of it, I thought, oh God, it's the book. So I managed to track the lady down, and she turned out to be Stephen Fry's sister. So I said, oh, well, actually, if I sent you a large copy of the book, could you, like, one of the posh hardback versions, I said, could you see that Stephen gets it? Because I think he'd like it. And she said, oh yeah, not a problem. Just send it to me at my home address and I'll pass it on to Stephen. So I did. He hasn't got back to me yet. So if you're watching, Stephen, get back to me now.
Don't think he's a group member, sadly.
He might be.
No, well, we know who the members are. So I think it's Jason has asked, can you tell us a little bit about book 2?
Right. Book 2 is it's a Jack Slade novel. I don't want to give too much away, but there's a thing called mudlarking. And mudlarking is when you go along the side of a riverbank when the tide goes out and see what you can find that's washed up. And we have the River Tyne, which flows through Newcastle. And in this, the opening to the book, a guy is mudlarking along the side of the river, and he finds a box. He can't get it open, so he takes it home. And when he opens the box and he forces it open, it contains a body part. And body parts then start appearing around Newcastle. And they can't identify who these parts belong to. And then as the inquiry goes on, they realise that they belong to people that went missing many years ago. And I can't tell you any more because I want you to read the book.
He wants to know if you would live anywhere else.
I would miss Northumberland. I adore Northumberland. I've lived in the Newcastle upon Tyne area all my life. I moved to Northumberland about 20 years ago. As I say, my brother and I have this sort of cottage that we worked on up there. It's right in the centre of things. It's in a village called Belford. It's 5 miles from Bamborough Castle. It's about 5 miles from Chillingham Castle. It's 15 miles from Alnwick Castle, where they filmed Harry Potter, and 15 miles from Berwick. It's right slap bang in the centre of things, and I just love it. I love Northumberland. I love the scenery. I love the beaches. The weather could be better, but I don't think there's anywhere else I would like to live, really. And I've travelled the world. I mean, I've been all over the world. The only place I was tempted to live in more than up here, my sister lives in Australia, and although we speak frequently on FaceTime and Messenger, I would like to see more of my sister as as she gets older, we both get older. But even if I was in Australia, I'd miss Northumberland.
Would you take Jack out of Northumberland and send him anywhere else?
Well,
He
Ian.
could come to America and kill off a bondage author.
Yeah, he'd be tempted to. Well, Ian took Rebus, that's Ian Rankin. Ian took Rebus down to London for a murder inquiry. I think Jack belongs in Northumberland and Newcastle. There's plenty for him to deal with in Newcastle and Northumberland. There's plenty of death and destruction up here without him having to travel across to America. I've been on. My nephew is actually a cop in Texas, so I've been on patrol with the Houston Police Department, and it was like one of the roughest areas of Newcastle with guns. So I think Jack's probably safer staying in Newcastle.
So T wants to know if you'd co-write with another crime writing author.
Yeah, I'd be tempted. I tried to co-write with a friend of mine, Elliot Kerrigan, who was the BBC writer behind Boy Meets Girl, which was a BBC comedy. And we were trying to write a sort of, it was actually a crime comedy, because he's a comedy writer. But it just didn't seem to quite gel at the time. So we've shelved that, although we were chatting about it yesterday, because it was based on fact. And it was to do with the specials, which are the constables that help the police out on a voluntary basis. And years ago, I used to work a lot with the specials in Northumbria. And when I retired, the specials contacted me, and now every year, about 3 or 4 times a year, they ring me up, and somebody comes and picks me up, takes me out, for a meal with them, and then brings me back home at night. So I must have been all right with the specials. So I'm tempted to write this comedy drama about the specials, and Elliot and I are still bouncing it around.
Nice. T wants to know what books you read when you're relaxing. What you're reading right now?
At the moment, I'm reading Peter James, his latest book. Where did I put it? Oh. I've been isolating for the last few days in a hotel because of Vera, because of COVID. So I don't know what I've done with it, but it's the latest Peter James book, which is I'll Follow You to Your Till You're Mine, I think it's called. I love Peter James because his chapters are so short that when your eyes start drooping, at night just before you switch the light off, and you think, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit," and you look, and the next chapter's only 3 pages, and you think, "Oh, I'll just read that one," and before you know it, you've read several more chapters. So I just love the way Peter James writes. Before that, I finished Mari Hanna's latest book, which was about the disappearance of an aircraft. And another one which I started writing because I had it just in paperback, and I took it away with me to read on set, was by my former boss, Graham Pears, who writes about a detective called Jet in Newcastle. So of all of them, I just love the different writers. Peter James, I find I can whiz through those because the chapters are so short. Same with Mari. Mari's books I always read fast because they're so short, the chapters.
I'm reading an arc of Mike Craven's new book.
I don't know that one.
Have you not read M.W. Craven?
No, I haven't.
The puppet show and things are based in Cumbria.
All right.
They're very good. He's very popular in the group.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I shall have to look at it.
One of the sort of group favourite authors, I think. He often comes high in the Author of the Year poll.
Am I right that Danielle's a member of your group as well, Danielle Ramsey?
Yeah, we have about 500 author members.
Right. Oh, great. Well, yeah. Well. I was speaking to Danielle some time ago. I've just read her book, and I think her stuff's very dark, isn't it?
I don't know if I've read her books yet.
Oh yeah. Well, I think they would make good TV programs as well. So if you're listening, Danielle, when this lockdown's over, let's have a drink and discuss that.
T says she helps train specials in Kent.
She works for the specials in Kent?
No, she helped train specials.
Helped train them. Oh, yeah. I think people that are prepared to give up their own time to assist the police, especially in the current climate where everybody seems to have a downer on the police, I just think they're great. Volunteering to help out. Some of the, I shouldn't be saying this, but some of the regular police officers, I'm talking about a lot of years ago, they used to complain that they thought specials might take their overtime and things. But I always got on very well with the specials, and I used to sort of berate any police officers that would say anything against them, because these guys and girls turn out in their own time to help the officers and take some of the tasks that allow regular officers to go and sort of do the things that even better trained for. So I'm a great supporter of the specials. And as I say, Elliot and I are still talking about doing this drama. It would be a Dad's Army type thing, but about the specials.
Jason Kelly says he sees that Brenda Blethyn enjoyed Death Rattle.
Yes, she did actually. I was on set. We were up at a wooded area called Thornton Woods, filming a scene for Vera. and a body had been discovered in the woods, and I was a uniformed cop, and I was going through, sort of doing a search of the undergrowth and things. And we did a rehearsal, and then just before we did another rehearsal, I heard Brenda call out, "Is that David?" And I looked up, obviously, and I said, "Yeah." She said, "I've read your book. It's great." And I thought, oh, but she, bless her, she did it in front of everybody, in front of the producer who was there that day, the director, the second AD, the third AD, all the camera crew, all the other support artists, because we don't call ourselves extras now, we're support artists, you know. And I was partly embarrassed, but so happy. And I just thought that was so nice of her to do that in front of everyone. You know, what better publicity for your book can you have than the lovely Brenda Blethen sort of telling everyone how great a book it is in front of, and with the producer being there, I wondered if she'd done it deliberately. We'll see.
What kind of research did you have to do for your books? Because obviously you know the police procedures. Did you have to look up sort of details about forensics or?
No, I think a lot of it, the forensic, I don't go too in depth to it, but I make sure that it's accurate. All your watchers and listeners, they're all crime readers, so they'll not mind me saying something a little grisly, but I hope. When I was, before I left the West End, the Wild West as we used to call it, sort of, I'm talking about in the late 1990s, I think, because I've been on other stations since then. A guy turned up at the counter, and I happened to speak to him, and he turned out to be a senior police officer. He tried to convince me he was a pathologist, but you know, I'm not that green. And he laughed and he said, "No, actually, I'm here because of there's been a suspicious death overnight, which I knew about." And he said, "I'm here for the post-mortem." And I said, "Oh yeah, just come in." And he said, "If any of your officers would like to come along to the post-mortem, they'll be most welcome, you know, for a bit of experience." Now, for me, sending young cops along to something like that, I can't see how they sort of think that it's good experience for them. But then again, so I said, well, I'll ask around. If anyone wants to go along, I'll make sure that I give them sufficient time to go along and view it. I said, I've managed to avoid it for 20 odd years. And he said, "What, you're the acting inspector?" I was acting inspector at the time. "You're acting inspector and you've never been to a post-mortem?" And I said, "No, I managed to avoid it." He said, "Well, you should come along to this one if you've never been one, just out of interest." And I said, "No, I've managed to avoid it for 20 odd years. I think I'll manage a bit longer." And he said, "This will be the freshest you've ever been to." And I said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" He says, "He's not dead yet." And I said, "Well, how have you booked him in for a post-mortem?" He said, "Oh, well, he'll be dead by the time we do it." And I just thought, how can you be so blasé? But then I thought, you know, if I'm going to be a writer, maybe it's something I should experience. And so I went along to this post-mortem. A couple of my cops, the young lads and lasses, wanted to go along, so I let them go along, and I went along myself. And it was the first post-mortem I'd been to, but I watched everything that went on as a writer would do, and I incorporated it into one of the scenes in Death Rattle. So yeah, a lot of it's, I didn't have to do much research, put it that way.
There's a guy who writes crime books in our group, obviously, who works as a senior CSI in West Yorkshire, and he tells a story about taking photos at a post-mortem and then he fell off a ladder onto the body.
Oh, horrible. No, I never liked dead bodies. As a young cop, you you find that you deal with a lot. I was green as grass when I went in the job. I was only 18 and a half. And it's such a regular thing, sudden deaths, that they give them to the young cops because they don't want to do the paperwork. So if there's a death comes in, it's like, oh, give it a young Fred or give it a young David, and you end up dealing with them. And the first one I went along to, there was a seasoned old police doctor was there, because you used to have, in those days, you used to have the doctor to certify that the person was actually dead. And I went along, and he turned up, and it was a dead body, and they were lying, and their arm was outstretched. They lay down on the settee and died, and their arm was sort of outstretched across the floor. And this doctor came in and took one look, and then lifted the arm and sort of bounced the arm and said, "Oh yeah, he's dead." And I said, "Oh, right." And that was his medical diagnosis. Aye, he's dead. So I said, "Oh, right." And he said, "I would guess at his age it's been natural causes." And I was green as grass, honestly. I was only a kid. And I says, "Oh, right." And he said, "Still, son," he says, "you and me will roll him over and see if there's a knife in his back. Because if there's a knife in his back, we're both in trouble, you know." and that was my sort of exposure to the black humour of anybody from forensics and anybody from the medical profession and cops. It rubs off on cops, and they've got to. I try to put that black sense of humour into the books, but yeah, there is a dark sense of humour that cops and people that deal with these violent incidents have. But yeah, it's been an interesting life working in that field, I can tell you.
Someone here has asked, do you know how many speed books you intend to write?
Who knows if Jack Slade takes off. My friend Maury, I think she's up to about book 11 or 12. And Stephen Fry's bought the rights to Maury's books. So that might end up as a TV series as well. I don't know. I mean, Peter James has written loads, and so has Ian Rankin, another author who I really like, Ian Rankin. I just love his Revis books. So who knows how many? We'll see. I might get pushed off to a side to do documentaries and go back to the filmmaking. The last documentary I did won a Royal Television Society award. Sorry, was nominated for a Royal Television, a bit different, was nominated for a Royal Television Society award. So I might go back to doing a bit of film work for a while. As long as I enjoy it, I'll carry on doing it. And if an idea pops into my head, then yeah, I'll be up there writing that away as well, getting that down on.
Sam wants to know what has been your most memorable moments as an author so far.
As an author, I've only once, I think, been stopped. Actually, it was probably Brenda, when Brenda called out in front of everybody and said, "Oh, it's David, I've read your book and I loved it," and things. That was probably the most memorable. I've been stopped in the street by people that have read the book, and it's lovely to hear from people that have read it and enjoyed it. I've had lots of cops and some names from the past, from when I was in the job, and they've been in contact and said, "Oh, I've read your book and I loved it." Getting praise from cops is important, because I know that I'm doing it right, because cops are terrible critics. As I told you, there's things I see on television and they just drive me crazy. I mean, how many times do you see on television when the cop turns up at somebody's door and says, I've got a warrant here for your arrest"? No, you haven't. You don't need a warrant to arrest somebody. Why do they keep putting it in? The only time a warrant tends to be issued is if somebody's failed to turn up at court. Everywhere else, you have plenty of powers under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act to arrest people for an arrestable offence. These days, you can arrest people for dropping litter. You don't need to turn up to somebody's door and say, I have a warrant for your arrest. No, you haven't. So there's lots of these things sort of annoy me. But, we have a search warrant for your house. No, you don't. You don't need a search warrant. If you're arresting somebody in their house, you can search the house under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. So it's all these sort of things that they get wrong that annoy me a little.
I've got an author chat on Sunday with a husband and wife writing team that police both worked. One is a civilian, one is a police person, and they're very keen on police procedure being correct. Yes,
well, it comes from the job. It really does. It comes from being a cop, from being in the job. Things do annoy you if they get it wrong.
So I'm reading the other questions. TG wants to know what TV actor you would take for a drink.
What TV? Well, I owe Brenda a drink, I tell you that, for her comments. I quite like Kevin Whately, who plays Lewis and was in Morse. I like what I'm watching at the moment is American Tom Selleck in Blue Bloods, and he also plays Jesse Stone in another series of thrillers police thrillers based on books. So TV actor, I think there's quite a few I would think. Kenny Doughty's a bit of a laugh on Vera. He's a nice lad, and I actually did buy him a drink in Harrogate one time when he was down there. So,
are you going to go to Harrogate this year? It's rumoured to be on.
If it's on, if you're going, if anyone's going, come up and speak to me, please. I booked for Harrogate, as you know, to get in the Swan. You've got to book a year in advance. So I was at Harrogate a couple of years ago. So that'll have been 2018. And I booked for 2019. And I booked there and then, as soon as it opened, to book for the next year. And it was cancelled. And they said, do you want your money back? Or do you want to carry it on to next year? And I said, just carry it on. So I'm actually paid up and booked up, although I haven't heard from them. But if it goes ahead, I'll be there.
So lovely Sam, who's our other author chat admin. So if you come back for another chat, you would have as a host.
Oh, right.
Coined the phrase Harrogate for Harrogate because she is my Harrogate. She is who I would go to Harrogate Crime Festival with. Who would you take?
Well, I was talking to Elliot, the writer of Boy Meets Girl, yesterday, and he's getting into crime books. And I said, look, Elliot, if you're getting into crime books, get yourself down to Harrogate. So he has said, if I ever get an author table at Harrogate, that he will be straight down to come and sit on my table. So I've told him he should get down before then anyway. The other one I would probably, my friend Michael Wilcox, who wrote the Inspector Morse screenplay, he's up in Northumberland, and he used to travel all over, but he's getting a bit older. I think it would be nice to take him down to Harrogate and show him around, because I'm sure he would love it.
Yeah, it's a really good atmosphere.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And you see, everybody's so relaxed. Everybody's, it's just lovely to see everyone. You know, Mark Billingham and Ian Rankin, and a couple of years ago it was Lee Child, who was absolutely charming. So I love it. I absolutely love it.
He's been in here for a chat.
Has he?
Yeah, we had Lee Child on last year. And Matt Billingham's in the group.
He was telling me he can read a book in a day.
Yeah, I can.
Can you?
Yeah.
I wish I could. But yeah, he's saying he reads a book in a day. He must be able to. Are you able to speed read? Is that the trick?
No. I read a book from cover to cover. I read everything. I can even tell you the copyright thing. I read every page. But I can read a book in a day.
I wish I was able to do that, but
I don't. It's just your natural reading pace, I think. Maybe. Is it? Sam says, "What's the pardon?"
No.
Sam says, "What's the biggest thing that authors get right that you like to see?"
The biggest thing they get right. Well, it's become a cliche, but the biggest thing that authors get right is that every cop, like every person, has some kind of dark side to them. They're either they drink too much, or they're going through a bad relationship, or they've got some demon at the back of them, and it has become a bit of a cliche that, like, Peter James will kill me for saying it's a cliche that Roy Grace is on a constant search for his wife, because that's a bit different. But the cliche is that they've all got an inherent fault. Rebus drinks too much. The Kate Daniels and the Maury Hannah books, she's hiding a secret relationship. So they've all got their own little demons. Like Jack Slade is living in the shadow of his father, who was a well-respected cop. And in book 2, he goes to visit his father to have help in an ongoing inquiry in the Jackie in the Box murders. So they've all got faults, which are the sort of the B story. So that's what and authors get that right.
So we're coming to the end of our time. Sam's just commented that it's been a fun interview listening to all of your stories, and she looks forward to interviewing you in the future.
Good. I will look forward to speaking to her. Yeah.
Is that so? We try to, as much as possible, mix up hosts. So if you've been with one host, you get a different host next time.
Right. Well, I'll be quite pleased to come back and tell you when book 2's out.
Yeah, you'll have to let us know.
And then book 3. But
so before we finish, do you want to remind us, show off your book cover and things again, so for the people who've been watching, just in case they haven't already got a copy? Well, you don't want us mistaking you.
This is Death Rattle. As I say, based in the northeast, the background is the castle, which is the original castle, and Death Rattle is it says a very dark and gritty world of exploitation and murder, and it is dark. It's definitely not for the faint-hearted. So give it. Sometimes it appears on Kindle. The Rod, who, as I say, appears to be a member of your group, he sometimes puts it out on Kindle at £1 or a couple of quid, for a special offer. So if you don't want to invest in the hard copy book, you can always get it on Kindle. And if you've got Kindle Unlimited, I think it's free on Kindle Unlimited. So give it a shot. If you like it, tell everybody. If you don't like it, tell me.
That's a good way to end. Right. So, thanks for coming on.
Lovely to speak to you.